Welcome to Samvadh. I'm in conversation with Ms. Aarti Rajaratnam. We are talking on the topic cyberbullying. Ma'am, how is cyberbullying different from regular bullying?
Before we go into just cyberbullying, we also need to understand that as human beings, just like we are capable of love, of compassion, of empathy, we are also capable of the exact opposite, which is harassing another person, causing willful harm to other people, etc. Because this polarity exists in human behavior. The original bullying definition was a consistent and targeted effort to hurt someone, which is regular bullying. Now that you needed to have the courage to meet somebody in person.
And do it in face to face.
So for example, I'm sure like at least I was bullied when I was a kid, and it would have both verbal and non-verbal components, right?
What's a non-verbal component?
So I could just be excluded, and especially I studied in an all-girls school. I was quite popular, but there was one group of seniors who would specifically want to exclude me from all their activities and things like that. So they would exclude me, and then when you're walking past, make these remarks, etc., or just laugh. And then when you go and tell any adult like a teacher or a parent that they're just laughing at me, the usual thing will be, why don't you ignore it? What the adult does not see is that this is happening as a planned effort to cause me harm, right? Which is why it's persistent and targeted. However, in cyberbullying, it's much different because you don't need to have the courage to do it face to face. I can create a fake ID and I can hide behind that fake ID. You may not even know that it's me. I can be having a great relationship with you in person, but I could be shaming you online every day. And it causes such distress to the person who's being bullied because it pushes them into what we call the stress response, which is the fright, flight, freeze response. And it gives me, if I'm the bully, then it gives me a huge sense of power because you've still not discovered who I am. So the relational dynamics of cyberbullying is much more painful than any other form of harassment.
I've been hearing various forms of cyberbullying. Could you explain a little bit on what are the different forms of cyberbullying?
Most people think cyberbullying is actually trolling. And trolling is just criticizing somebody online. So you put out some content and I just shame you, saying what kind of nonsense have you put, or I take one aspect of your appearance and shame you for it. I call you names, or I shame you for your political affiliation, something like that. However, trolling alone is not harassment because trolling is not persistent and it's not targeted. I can just go online today, get triggered by something and just shame. I don't need to necessarily come back to your page or come back anywhere. Whereas when we are talking about cyberbullying targeting, what is the first form that you're going to see is body shaming. Now recently, if you saw, there was this topper in Uttar Pradesh with a lot of facial hair, and the girl was shamed for her appearance when she's actually supposed to be celebrated for the performance that she was put in. In fact, I would go one step further to say there was an influencer who actually gave her a makeover, which was even worse. Because you're just telling her that you're ugly as you are, right? So somewhere we have, let the lines blur in this. So this is at the level of body shaming, and it can be for appearance, for what they're wearing, and it's a very classist thing if you notice. So somebody from a lower economic strata, when they do something, people from the upper economic strata tend to make fun of that just because they can't afford something. I don't know if you remember, there was a Nigerian girl who morphed her photograph in all the 7 wonders of the world, just because she could not afford to travel to different places. That was the easiest she could access this thing. But a lot of people who could afford to travel, a lot of travel bloggers made fun of her, and I think that's also a very mean form of cyberbullying because you're making it a very classist kind of thing. Then of course there's the shaming, racist shaming that happens, etc. Now these are established forms. The ones that people are not really, body shaming and trolling is still understood. But when we take the other forms, a lot of people don't understand there's this concept called catfishing. Catfishing is where I create a false persona and a fake profile, whatever, and I exploit it relationally. So let's assume that, you know, there's a very shy, timid girl in my class or a boy in my class. I'm going to use this fake ID to sort of make them feel that, you know, somebody is romantically or otherwise involved or wants to be friends, create this whole story around it, get their hopes high, and then finally, you know, take that information to the class saying, see how stupid this person was, they fell for this. And catfishing is very, very painful for a child who's already struggling with
their own you know, confidence or
self-worth and all of that,
everything.
right? The second thing that I notice is defamation. So you notice that, you know, they take you know, decide to shame somebody very specifically, and this is very, very common in these so-called confession pages of schools. If you know,
that's been quite shocking. I mean, not been really aware of this, and when I try to look into it, I mean, the kind of comments I've seen that are really, really mean. And why do you think they do this?
Ma'am, like I mentioned earlier, as human beings, we've always ganged up against each other. As much as we cooperate, we've always had the us versus them. I was always the geek, right? And I would have a lot of people who would shame me for my appearance because I didn't fit the traditional standards. Now, they would probably make fun of me, I mean, now blame me for calling them stupid, right? Whether it was an act of self-preservation or not, we do gang up against each other. And especially in the teen years, we call it relational aggression in girls. So what happens is a group
like
of
the mean girls.
The mean girls, and you know, you have those things. So that is definitely something that is a problem. With boys, the cyberbullying used to only be physical earlier. They would either hit each other, tease each other in the washroom, those kind of coterie behavior as we call it. But now, because of the anonymity of this, the confession pages go one step further to shame people using orientation, shame people using gender fluid terms, etc., because they find that these are all very easy ways to hurt somebody, to cause hurt.
And they also spread rumors.
So the defamation part of cyberbullying is this. Then you have the third, which is called doxing. Doxing is not so common among teenagers, but we also need to know it comes from the larger term of dropping documents, which is I deliberately hack into information and then use that sensitive information, leak that sensitive information outside. The last that we find very common, especially after the online classes of COVID, a lot of children had access to pornography throughout the COVID years. And we find that a lot of revenge porn is being sent, which is you have a lot of AI tools where you can morph pictures onto bodies and things like that. So a lot of that is happening, and this is causing tremendous stress for young children, because pornography itself is not something that they are exposed to, but when they are the object that has been shamed in the whole video, it becomes very difficult, because these are not things that many children find comfortable to share with their parents. Now let's just imagine a child goes and says, my classmate morphed this picture. So the parent's normal response out of a lot of anxiety is going to be, why are you friends with them? Who asked you to post your picture online? It's going to be a very attack driven. So I'm already being shamed in an attack, and then the parental attack is going to be more from, you were the one who made the mistake. So this is where cyberbullying becomes very tricky, because the child feels unsupported for something that is not directly their fault.
New world. How do children themselves protect from cyberbullying?
One is, before I go into directly equipping children, the adults. Now, I am somebody from a generation that I'm a technology migrant, right? Just about posting a picture, I don't even understand hashtags in so many words. So,
even worse than that.
So, we are technology migrant, they are technology native. So, they definitely know what to do online. But still, just like if you were to leave your child at home, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to come back, I'm going to tell my child, don't open the door for a stranger. If somebody comes, give me a call. We are going to give them specific things, right? Or when we say don't talk to strangers, we give instructions for physical safety. Cyber safety is even more important, because you brought all of that right into your rooms, like your living room, your bedroom, you have access to all of this. So the first conversation before you give a gadget to a child is to let them know how they can be safe. And there are 3 basic rules the parent needs to give the child. The first is, you will not share your location, passwords, or any other sensitive information with anybody. And earlier the rule was with people you don't know. Now we say with anybody, because anything can be hacked, right? Technology becoming more and more advanced, we will be able to hack. So the first is location. Anything that can identify you, etc., is not allowed. Second, you need to let them know that you have to follow the 3 R's. One is reduce your time online, because the more time you're online, the more windows you're opening, the more you're accessing, you are opening yourself to so many more attacks. True. Right? Reduce is the first. Second, if you have been trolled, if you have somebody who's constantly taunting you online, is asking you for information, is being inappropriate. When I say inappropriate, it's not just the harmful content. Somebody being overly friendly online, overly praising you online, is setting themselves up for stalking. Right? So any of this inappropriate within boundaries, if it's not there, then restrict. Restrict meaning block them, don't give them access, don't share photographs, etc. with them. That is very important. And the third is extremely important, which is report. Report on the platform you're using. That's the first, because at least at that level you can block something. The second is you can do it at the police station, the cyber cells of the police. Of course, I do not have great experience with the cyber cell so far, but I think unless it becomes a habit, the police department also may not take it very seriously. True. Right? So this is at the level of children. We'll need to start at this level. Second is when we talk about parents, like you asked me, what can parents and educators do? We have to have open conversations and repeated conversations. We always think that, if I've spoken once and told them, you shouldn't do this, they've already internalized the message.
So like you said, we are migrants. We don't know, the nitty-gritties and technology, how it can, get into cyberbullying. How do you give advice to children when you yourself are not familiar with the platform?
The first thing is monitor the usage of the child. See, very often I've seen parents giving a gadget to a child. It's totally unmonitored. They have free Wi-Fi. They can use it anywhere. So if you really want to start at the level of monitoring, have a gadget that the child is going to use for online work in a place where you can see what they're going into. Because when you are able to actually see that my child is accessing this site or is constantly on this site or is doing something, you will be able to have a conversation about it, find out what it is.
Ma'am, that's very good in an ideal situation, especially teenagers. They are the ones who are in this cyberbullying situation, but not the younger ones. They themselves like to be, they live in isolation most of the time when they're at home. So how do we monitor this, ma'am?
I would ask you why they want isolation, right? They will want a space. I'm not saying it's wrong. They will want a space. They will want a time with a peer group. But if they're going into isolation and choosing a gadget over you, I would ask the parent to question, why is the relationship falling apart? It's a very important thing, because for addictions and distractions to change, there must be a solid relationship with the adult. So to even have these conversations, the relationship needs to be very solid. By that I mean that you can't go there and say, I'm going to tell you how to use it. They definitely know better, because when you buy a new phone, they're the ones who are configuring it for you. So when they know that, it's not going to be easy for you to say, okay, let me tell you how to be safe here.
So we come back to the same thing, that our relationship, our communication with our children has to be strong for us to have any kind of conversation about anything. I understand that it is finally our relationships we have to strengthen by open communication, but is there anything the parents can educate themselves on to have better information on cyberbullying, ma'am?
Not just cyberbullying, but just internet usage itself. A lot of parents can, look for software. There is a lot available, both paid and free software, which can protect our children from the internet. So educating themselves, and then most importantly, making the decision along with the child. Many times parents come up with the software and say, I'm going to use this. The child, when you impose something, teenagers are going to find ways to break the code there. So it would be something that you'll have to install together and work together. More importantly, be accessible to your child when something is going wrong. Because what happens is, many times children will judge how you will speak to them about any challenge based on something else. Like, I've lost a pencil, how do you treat me then? Or if I've had a fight with my friend, how do you treat me then? Your exaggerated responses there will 100% ensure they don't speak to you when there's something serious like cyberbullying happening, which is where it's important to understand that you may not be a perfect parent, but you need to be real, and then work through these things together, because solutions can be arrived at only together.
Thank you, Aarti ma'am. That was an interesting episode. Most of us are not familiar with cyberbullying, but the one thing we can work on is communication with our children. Be open to when they can come and talk to us, where we can help them. I hope this was helpful for you. Looking forward for you to join us in the next episode.